everybody. Welcome to another edition of Reigniting Small Business. I'm Laura Richards, and I'm here with Patrick Lee, CEO of SBI.
Hello, Laura.
Hello, Patrick.
So let's just get right down to it here. We have talked in previous podcasts about the Great Resignation. And today, we're going to start off this episode by reading some stories of folks who are exiting the workforce or who have exited the workforce because of what they say is burnout. And then we'll talk about what burnout means and how employers and employees can potentially safeguard against it. Some of that may end up in our second podcast coming up next week, but we're going to cover as much of this as we can today.
Awesome. So first up, Alexis. Alexis is a 38-year-old who works in the PR industry, and here's what she has to say. Work burnout happened to me when I worked at a large corporation and realized that although I was putting in long hours, doing the work and looking good on paper, I was going nowhere. Then I saw a meme. It said, if you died tomorrow, your job would be posted faster than your obituary. And it sucked all of the joy out of everything I did.
Yeah, that's dark. So let's hear from Camilla. She's 29. That's young. And she's a health and safety professional in the meat industry. So she says, burnout happens when work consumes your mind outside of the office, yet your only opportunity for a long time is to tread water while killing yourself. For me, the burnout was serious when I relapsed badly into anorexia nervosa. It took me a year to recover to the point where I could work again. And even at that, I only worked part-time out of the house. Anything more, and I could easily slip back. Her husband, who works in hospitality and retail, is burnt out too. She talks about him and says, he realized it was bad months ago, but felt trapped. He has since handed in his notice with no job to go to because he simply can't take it anymore, Camilla says. He feels suicidal, exhausted, and hopeless. But having put in his notice, he instantly felt better. Camilla has come to the exact same conclusion as Alexis did, which is at the end of the day, your job will be posted before your funeral notice ever will be. Remember that.
Wow. So Patrick, it sounds like a telltale sign of burnout may be that people start thinking in terms of life and death as it pertains to work. So if you're wondering what would happen if you died tomorrow, like whether they'd fill your job right away, that's probably not a good sign. You're not just tired. This is an existential question about what is the meaning and purpose of life. And that's what we are seeing.
No, we definitely are seeing that. And, I think that existential is a really good word, right? Because all of a sudden, purpose is paramount for us. And when we look at our purpose in our jobs, we're expecting return beyond our pay. And I think a lot of this is realization that this role can be filled by anybody. So is my purpose to fill a role that I'm only recognized if I'm in it at that time and there's no further impact? Now, I don't know that it happens with everybody in their job positions, but I think a lot of folks end up there. So let's bring in another person. Alice, 28, also very young, felt suddenly and wholly burned out after her company announced a major restructuring. It soon became clear to her that there was no longer a future for her there, but it was a job that she had sincerely loved. So here we are back around a little bit where this is a job that was filling purpose and meaning, and she was joyful, but that didn't matter to the company, right? And she had worked hard at it for years. So she says, I sobbed. And I was like, I haven't cried like this since I was dumped by my abusive ex. It was as painful as any romantic betrayal, she says. I felt empty. Only unlike a breakup, Alice is still connected to her employees because she says, I'm financially dependent on them.
That sounds really painful. And it sounds really familiar. Many years ago when I was laid off from a software company, I had never been laid off from a job. I had only been promoted every place I had been. And it was one of those jobs where, they had a basketball court and they had a cafeteria that was always stocked with food. So you didn't have to go out anywhere. And you were there from sun up till well past sundown, and you were getting your FaceTime, and they sucked everything from you. So, and it was a lot of my identity, was being the marketing director there. So when I got laid off, I literally had never felt more worthless in my entire life. It affected my very idea of myself, who I was, and my identity. So I can understand from a first person perspective what these people are going through. So all these stories that we're talking about today and that we're going to be updating you on next week are all from an article in Refinery 29 by Wizzy Kim, and its title is "Scambition. Is That All That There Is? Why Burnout is a Broken Promise?" And that's what we're basing the next two podcasts around. So Patrick, people are struggling, obviously, as we're talking about how to access joy around work being their centering force, and not being able to access joy around work. Should work just be work?
Yeah. So let's look at what's been going on. I mean, I think these are great questions, and I think these questions, there's other ways in which these questions have been brought up in the past, but maybe not around affecting the workforce as much. Like right now, we have the Great Resignation. We have people seeing all that, and we'll look at why. But I'm sure we've all read or heard about when people are on their deathbeds and they're saying their last words to folks, they're not regretful that they didn't get that promotion or that they didn't go further in their career for the most part. They generally bring up things like they wish they had paid more attention to certain relationships, and they wish that they had spent more time with family or friends, or they traveled the world, or they have regrets that are frequently not about career or success, right? And waiting till you're on your deathbed for those realizations, I think people are realizing now, and we know why, right? Because let's look what's been going on, right? COVID-19 has disrupted, for most people, the standard routine. Think hamster wheel, right? That we've all been on, and that we all were on, and it gave us time and space away from work to think about our lives in a different way. In fact, it forced us to. It wasn't simply it gave us the time. Like COVID itself was a life-threatening event, and it was something unprecedented for all of us. So we are forced into thinking about things completely differently. And even if you started out that sitting in place, just waiting for, things to come back to normal, well, it's taken so long that even the most, stubborn, I'm just waiting till this is over, folks are having to adjust, because it's not going to go back to exactly where it was. So I think it gave us that time, and it also gave us an ability to appreciate life, an appreciation for life, when there's more to it than just a commute and a work day, right? And then a decompression from that work day. So I'll talk, I think, real quickly a little bit about, my experience there, because I ended up still working. I mean, I'm at home, I'm trapped, but I'm busy. And I am interfacing on Zoom with clients all the time, right? And it's very intense, just as intense as it was. In fact, it's more intense because these clients are small businesses, and they're worried, and we're very intense. But it sort of chopped off what was sort of a pseudo social thing, right? Because I've got these clients and all, but then I'm meeting usually somebody related to work, whether it's a client or an associate or something, out for a margarita or something, or, so the social is tied into the work, but now that's cut off. So all there is work. And I'm an introvert. So it was easy for me to initially start, but it's good to be an introvert in that situation until it's not. And so my thing was, I needed to do something. And I started having all those same thoughts. So I started walking, and I needed to do something. So I'm walking my neighborhood. I start making connections to people in the neighborhood that I wouldn't have made connections to, and they're making connections back because we don't really have any choice. I'm getting in shape. I'm out in nature. I'm thinking differently. I'm looking at the world differently, and that become that mental health piece. And it made my entire focus of things look very, very different to me. And in fact, as we're starting to get back to normal now, I'm starting to get frustrated that my schedule doesn't allow as easily for me to do those walks that are now a barometer of, am I feeling good in my life, right? So what are we going to do here? And, to that end, it seems like, for the most part, up until maybe this moment, work in our country has come to define our very essence.
It's so true. And, I can echo what you're saying about having more time and feeling this connection to family during COVID that I hadn't realized was missing. And now that it's there, it's like, wow, I want to keep being able to fill this part of my tank. So it's interesting. In the 1970s, the psychologist Herbert Freudenberger coined the term burnout. And what he described was a feeling that he had from his own work. And what he said was, I don't know how to have fun. I don't know how to be readily joyful. And I think a lot like Freudenberger, the great resignees are asking, like, is this all that there is? Is this it?
And I think that's a great question, because we're driven to production, we're driven to success, we're driven to those things, and that whole joyful piece is really interesting, because even when we're being successful in work, are we joyful, or is the bar just moved a bit? The bar's moved a bit. Okay, I got there, but now I need to get here. And okay, well, I got there and I see this, but they have that. I mean, isn't it designed to pit you to what is the next movement in this, right? Mm-hmm. And so when people say they're joyful, and I know there are people who are joyful in their jobs, but I don't think that's the norm at all. And so when you attach words like joyful to this equation, it turns the whole thing on its head, and it makes you stop a little. Because I know people who would say right now, oh no, I'm very happy in my career, and I'm very happy with what I do and all. And then if you said, okay, well, do you get joy from it? I think there would be a pause. And then if you said, okay, well, if you don't get joy from work, I mean, you're satisfied at work, but you don't get joy. Do you get joy in your life? I think there'd be another pause. Mm-hmm. So, there's that old adage that, promised you that if you do what you love, you'd never work a day in your life, right? There's some truth to what it's trying to get across, but maybe it goes too far, or maybe people take it too far, because the great resignation folks, or the great resignees, they're actively looking for recovery from burnout and prioritizing joy. And I don't see the connection of the word joy and career in a way that we would instantly have an understanding. We'd have to sit here and discuss, well, what does that mean?
It's true. I do think there's the reverse, right? If you're burnt out at work, it steals joy from your life. And I've seen that with one of my neighbors who's so burned out with work, and it bleeds into his weekends, and basically might as well not be a Sunday, because, start freaking out on Saturday night about all the burnouts. So, yeah. And he's not alone. For a lot of Americans, work isn't just how we live our lives. It is why we live our lives. It's our motivation. It's the central thing that we, build our life around. So if this really is happening and it's not just a temporary thing, we'll see a complete paradigm shift, and if we do, I think a lot of what you said, life's just too short, and it's too important to wholly dedicate it to our work. So in that case, is work just work?
Well, I think you see some interesting examples of folks who don't fall into that, right? Who have some passion or pursuit or purpose, in their lives where they get fulfillment and all that has nothing to do with work. And they've approached it that I need a job, I need to put food on the table. I need a house, a roof over my head. I need, whatever that stuff is. And so I'm going to have a job to meet my needs so that I can, pursue my passion. And I think that the stereotype of that obviously is like the artist, right? The artist who is making art that they just are drawn to make, but they have either it's not sellable at real pricing, or it's not, that's not what they're doing it for. But they've created a way for each area of their life to fill different pieces, not all be concentrated in the one. And obviously that's the it's a great example because everybody knows the starving artist concept. But I think that exists in a lot of ways. You see folks who weren't going to be the professional athlete, but they live to play in their leagues and whatever, because that's still meaningful to them, and on and on and on. I mean, we can go on to that all over the place, but I do think that our culture wants productivity above anything else, and you're somebody if you've had a career or in a good career, and you're nobody like you felt if all of a sudden you're knocked off of the pedestal of where you were, and there's no easy place to land that keeps you at that same level. And I mean, I think this is just so illuminating, and it may sound obvious, but I don't think until very recently many of us really stopped to think about it and analyze it. And I find it funny because I've had many clients approach me with burnout, and I have helped them readjust their businesses so they're no longer burnout in their business. But have I done them a favor? I question that now, actually. I'm wondering, like, okay, I'm glad they're not burnt out anymore, but was there a bigger answer here?
Well, I think it's interesting too, because there are a lot of prognosticators that said, oh yeah, the reason why people aren't at work is because of the government subsidy. They're getting money. And as soon as that ends in September, the labor market's going to come back. And we haven't seen that happen. You and I were talking locally about what we're seeing in our backyard in Annapolis, Maryland, of lots of businesses, and this is across the country as well, where there just aren't employees. They didn't flow back to the jobs when the federal aid stopped, and now you're wondering, are those jobs going to come back? Those really low wage jobs, are those people going to come back to the Chipotles of the world and so forth?
Well, I find it really interesting, the dynamic around this, because this isn't just happening to Main Street business. This is happening to some of our largest big business retailers and franchises and so on. I mean, I'm thinking Dunkin' Donuts right now. I mean, the hours posted at my local Dunkin' Donuts are way down from when they have lobby time to when they even have the drive-through open, and all because of this. And you see Taco Bell advertising a signing bonus to get people to work at Taco Bell. Mm-hmm. And you've also seen some of these wages driven up, like standard Walmart, who's loved to pay low wages. It's all the time, is now all of a sudden starting to lead the labor market in what they're going to pay minimum, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the interesting thing. That is a typical reaction, I think, of big business. Okay, we're big, we have some money, let's throw some money at this. But I don't know that money necessarily addresses the real issue. I mean, you can do a roundabout, like if they have more money, they can do more things with their lifestyle, and maybe they can pursue things that fulfill them. You can make that argument, but it's not a direct, there's no culture change. There's none of that stuff. There's simply okay, they're demanding we pay them more, let's pay them more. But the fact they're not coming back, I think, is showing you that's not what they're thinking about. There is a huge disconnect, everything between what the workforce is saying and how the response is from those. And I actually think if we step back a little bit, and we're gonna foreshadow next week a little bit, but if we say, that's an opportunity for nimble small business Main Street to use culture to its advantage in competing for the talent that's out there with, big business, which is not reacting necessarily in a nimble fashion, or even an aware fashion. So let's think about this in terms of us passing this on, because when our kids are young, we're already telling them It's not work if what you do is, you love, right? If what you love is what you do, and we want to believe that our jobs can not only provide that financial stability, but also, emotional and spiritual fulfillment, social fulfillment, but not all work is a calling. And you see that, I mean, nobody would say that working in retail or any of that is a calling. I mean, if it is, it's for very, very few people, right? But the journey towards, and that's the change we're seeing right now.
Clearly, because like my story, unemployment terrifies people, right?
Oh yeah.
The idea that we're going to lose our livelihood, all of a sudden we're financially unstable. People might talk about us. We might become a cautionary tale, have a little bit of social plague. Nobody wants to be pitied like that, and it's scary. So to walk away proactively from a job without having another job just shows you how fed up or burnt out, or whatever the expression is that you want to use, folks are.
Yeah. And so there's a little bit of fear in me and frustration in me around this too, because, for change to happen and take hold and be real, there has to be planning, and there has to be nurturing, and there has to be understanding that change is hard. We've talked about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those things that feels more like an emotional response because I'm miserable, so there's got to be change, so I'm going to do X. But if it's not planned well, and if it's not nurtured well, and if it's not a movement, if it's just some people resisting the reality out there, are we doing people a favor by even bringing this up? Is ignorance actually bliss? Because like that couple that we gave the story up above, okay, I am happy that she is part-time and taking care of her health first. You've got to feel for that first and foremost. That's what you need to do. And then I feel for her husband who's like, I just had to quit, and he felt that weight go away when he did it. But we all know how this story could end. Not saying it will end, and we will actually see how some of these stories ended next week. But how it could end. It could end that there's no choice. Somebody's making a compromise. They're compromising their health, or they're compromising, their fulfillment or joy or whatever we want to put that to. And so I worry that a whole lot of these people are resisting, but that the steamroller of back to norm, this is what society does, this is all we know, is just going to roll over all those folks if they don't get more clarity around how it's sustainable and how you go about making these changes, because everybody's got to pay their mortgage. Everybody wants to eat. Everybody, and if all that's out there is that high-paying job at Taco Bell that you don't want, at some point you probably do take it. And so I'm hopeful that what we haven't done is awaken a whole slew of folks out there to the fact that you should be depressed with your life. I'd rather that this be, okay, now that you know this, what are you going to do different? What are you going to ask society to do different? How are you going to nurture this need and organize around this? Now, how are you going to do that stuff? Because it's not that simple that, okay, I got brave. I quit the job because I needed to. Okay, now what? So let's look at why that discussion sort of scares me a little bit, and why we do need to have a more clear path as to what to do with it. Okay. So, burnout, all right. We're talking burnout. So according to an insider survey of over 1,000 American workers, 61% said they were currently at least somewhat burned out. Okay, now that includes folks who are massively burned out and some who are just somewhat burned out. But that's a nice heavy majority right there, okay? An Indeed report from March found that the majority of respondents said their burnout had worsened during the pandemic, with 52% overall saying they were currently in burnout. All right? So that begs the question, what do we do about it?
Exactly. Those numbers are high, they're staggering, it needs to be addressed. What do we do about it? And we're going to talk about all that next week on the podcast. So come back and join us again then.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.